Ghosts of the Deep is out. It's a thing. This dungeon is a lot of fun. There are some great weapons to go for, like a Demolitionist and Incandescent SMG, so I might be finally saying goodbye to my Callus mini tool. Sad day. It also contains the coolest looking armor set in the entire game, which is a Hive Guardian set that glows. You definitely need this. But I don't want to drag out this intro too long, so let's just get right into it. Get ready to memorize some Hive glyphs, go deep underwater, take down some pretty tanky bosses, and experience a stunning visual spectacle throughout this entire dungeon. Starting off, you'll be able to sparrow around this whole opening area that will have you tracking down groups of Hive enemies in order to power up the middle section to open this blocked green doorway. After you start the encounter, look for a large ogre called the Soulfire Binder that will appear on one of the pathways leading to where you are, where it will start making its way to you. And once you take down this ogre, it'll leave behind a path of glowing green energy that you can follow, very similar to Wrathborn hunts from Season of the Hunt, and some areas in Savathun's throne world as well. Following this green energy will point you in the direction of where a large Hive glyph symbol will appear about 10 feet in the air. The path doesn't take you all the way to this floating symbol, by the way. You will have to do a bit of investigation around where the path ends to find this symbol. But once you do reach the symbol, enemies will spawn in and you'll have to completely clear them out to reveal another green energy pathway. Same thing here, just follow it again to find the next floating symbol, clear out the enemies, and follow one final pathway to this last group of enemies. Once you reach this final group, make sure to take note of what symbol is floating in the air. You'll need to have this memorized for when you head back to the middle area. There's no set naming structure for these 9 symbols that appear in this dungeon. They're the same ones that are in Kingsfall. They don't really look like anything, but my team has a bunch of weird names for them, and I'm sure your team will do the same thing. So this last group will contain a Hive Guardian, and whoever crushes its ghost will be given a Vestige of Light buff with a timer that's a little over 1 minute long. If this timer ever reaches 0, that player will die, but don't worry, 1 minute should be more than enough time once you know what you're doing. So, you crush the ghost, now it's time to head back to the middle area. You'll again have more enemies to clear out, along with a Veil Weaver wizard that you'll need to take out. This wizard will drop a deep sight activation orb when you kill it. This is the same deep sight stuff that we use all over Savathun's throne world and in the Witch Queen campaign. Once one player activates it, you all have it, which will let you see now that each throne now has a Hive glyph symbol on it, and the player that has the Vestige of Light buff will need to dunk it on the correct throne. The correct throne being whichever symbol was the final symbol of that last group of enemies you killed before heading back to the middle area. So that's why you had to memorize that symbol. Once you deposit the vestige on the correct throne, you will imbue that throne, so it will light up with green fire. Depositing your vestige on the incorrect throne will kill you, by the way, so that's why it's crucial to have Deep Sight active when depositing, so you know which one is the correct throne to deposit on. To finish this encounter, you'll need to imbue each throne by repeating the exact same steps as we've gone over so far. Keep in mind that this is a darkness zone, so if your whole team dies, you've got to start all over. But the nice thing here is that you do get a chest at the end, so dungeon loot right off the bat is pretty nice here. Now it's time to move on to the next area. Completing the first encounter will open the door that was blocked for you, so now you can run through it. And this entire next section is a very long, mostly underwater platforming section, but I absolutely love it. Just looking at all the crazy stuff that they put in underwater makes this a really cool experience. And thankfully, the path is for the most part pretty linear here. If you ever feel stuck, you most likely need to keep dropping down. Go deep underwater. There will be multiple times where you actually have to jump off a ledge to an area below you, so keep a lookout for those. One other thing I'll say here is that unlike activities like salvage and deep dives this season, the air pocket bubbles underwater are actually shared between you and your fire team. So if you use one, it's going to remove it for your teammates. So you'll want to try and stick together while popping the bubbles underwater as much as possible. That way you all get the benefit from it. And once you make it to this area, you've actually made it to the first secret chest. And that door on the left that you see there is where you enter here, and then you'll just jump up these rocks, go to the secret chest. It is right here. Keep pressing forward here. You'll have to make your way through a sunken hive ship next. There are lots of holes in the wall that you'll need to find, but again, this whole section is pretty linear, so you shouldn't have too much trouble. Eventually, you'll make your way to this underground area where Ecthar, the next final boss, will be waiting for you underwater. He will chase you, so make sure you don't stand still for too long. Just find the fan that will boost you up out of the water to make sure you're safe. Well, we're here. Time to face the first real challenge of the dungeon. This encounter can be somewhat overwhelming with the amount of enemies that spawn in, but over time, just like every other dungeon, we will learn better and more efficient ways of dealing with this. For now, feel free to utilize things like Solar Titan, Solar Warlock, and Arc Hunters to help you stay alive. Just whatever is your tankiest class that you feel the best with, use that and grab some good ad clearing weapons, but I will say that having a Well of Radiance is like so good here, so make sure you have it. We tested a few boss damage methods here. We're not sure what is optimal yet, but as long as you've got a Well of Radiance, which you should, there's no reason why you shouldn't have this, Gallarhorn and 2 legendary rockets seems to be a pretty good play here. All you have to do is make sure you have enough distance between you and the boss to obviously not blow yourself up, but surprisingly you can be pretty close to him while in a Well of Radiance and shooting a rocket and you'll be okay. So how does this fight work? Well, starting off, you'll have 3 blistered knights that will spawn in on the stairs and upper level of the area. You'll need to take down each of these knights to get an ogre to spawn in, called the Keeper of the Deep. Epic name. Once you take out this ogre, a deep sight activation orb will appear, so go ahead and activate that deep sight orb right away, and while this buff is active, you'll be able to look up on the left and right wall and see that there are 3 glyphs lit up. Hopefully by now you all have come up with some sort of naming structure for these glyphs at some point, but again, there are 9 in total that will appear. So now that you know what glyphs are active on the wall, you'll need to go underwater to activate them. All 9 glyphs are located on the walls underwater, and they do have set positions thankfully, so if you can memorize where they're at, you should be able to quickly dive down to the correct spot and activate them with little issue. And here's a map for you to help you memorize the area. I'll make sure to credit whoever made this in a tag below here. So my team likes to, for the most part, split up evenly here. Just call which glyph you'll be taking, but occasionally there will be 2 glyphs that are like right next to each other underwater, so you can feel free to take both of those if you want. It just makes it a little bit easier, a little bit quicker. Here's the kicker though. Ecthar will be relentlessly chasing you underwater, literally increasing the pressure every single time he swipes at you. One swipe will remove a big chunk of your oxygen, so avoid him at all costs. He's about as fast as you are, maybe just a little bit faster, but thankfully there are a few air bubbles that can help save you if he does land a hit. Either way, once you successfully activate any glyph underwater, a Hive Guardian Wizard will spawn up in the main boss room. And since you need to activate 3 glyphs underwater, that means you'll have to clear out 3 Guardian Wizards to help you to the boss phase. If you want to make things a little bit easier on yourself, you can choose to activate only 1 glyph at a time, then go up, kill the Hive Guardian Wizard, as having 3 Hive Guardian Wizards up in a crowded place can be a bit overwhelming if you're not careful. Whatever way you choose, killing this Guardian Wizard is just the first step in the process. Remember the first encounter when you crushed the Hive Ghost? You got the Vestige of Light buff and had to imbue one of those thrones? Well, you're essentially doing the exact same thing here. This time, you need to cleanse 3 thrones, and thankfully for this fight, there are no symbols that correlate with the correct thrones, so you can just imbue whatever thrones are not lit with green fire, since the ones that are lit have been imbued already. That just means one of your teammates has done that, or you have. Once all 3 thrones are imbued or glowing with green fire, one final large knight called the Well Keeper will spawn in that you can kill. And upon killing said knight, it will drop a pool of green energy that you can stand in to damage Ecthar. So I know that was a lot. Just a quick recap here. You kill the 3 blistered knights, which will spawn in a giant ogre. You kill the ogre to spawn in the deep sight orb, activate the deep sight, which will light up 3 glyphs on the left and right walls, go underwater, find those glyphs, and activate them. Remember, these glyphs stay in the same spot. They're not going to move on you underwater. Head upstairs to kill the now spawned in Guardian Wizards, and imbue each throne with the Vestige buff that you get from killing said wizards. Finally, kill the Wellkeeper Knight that spawns in, step in the green stuff, do damage. Both main boss fights have a new shield that will force you to remove it before you can damage them. Think of this as just a giant overshield. Nothing should change with your damage strategy, but don't be surprised when Echthar's HP bar doesn't go down right away. You've got to strip that shield first. The damage phase is around 30 seconds, so you should have enough time to get in a rhythm. Just make sure you're throwing any damage supers you have at him. Do whatever you can to do as much damage as possible. But once the damage phase is up, do everything all over again as many times as you need until Ecthar is killed. Yeah, there is a lot going on here, I know, but just like everything in Destiny, practice makes perfect. It'll seem like way too much is happening on your first few runs, but eventually you will learn how to manage the enemies and get to the underwater glyphs quickly. Cool. So with Ecthar out of the way, keep pressing forward and you'll eventually make it back to the Hive ship. And once you make it to this large room here, I'd recommend pulling out a scout rifle to help deal with the wizards, knights, and shriekers from a distance. This is a darkness zone, so you will wipe if you all die. Just play it slow, hang back, and get a feel of the room. Once you've cleared out everything here, you can jump to the top of this section to pick up the second secret chest. And once you've got it, just slip in this hole in the middle floor and continue pressing downward. And now we've hit the final boss room, it's time to deal with Ur-Nokru. And yeah, that's Oryx. This was really cool, and I really love this whole area. It is great. So this fight, again, is another fairly mechanic-intensive fight, but don't worry, that's why you're watching this guide. So the goal of this fight is to activate 3 floating orbs by taking the vestiges we get from killing those Hive Guardians, and we will imbue certain limbs of Oryx. It sounds a little bit weird to say that. But before getting into the fight, I want to explain the layout of this whole arena because there are a few different rooms here. First, you've got the Oryx room, obviously the main part of the arena. Oryx, as mentioned, has a few limbs sticking out of the ground that we'll need to know calls for. You've got head, chest, left hand, right hand, foot, and kneecap. Each of these will be points of interest in this fight, but that's all we'll cover on that for now. There are also 6 water walls that will lead to 3 smaller outer rooms, so 2 water wall entries for each of the 3 outer rooms. We will need to utilize these outer rooms to help get us to the damage phase, but without getting too far ahead of myself, let's just stop there for now. I just wanted to explain the layout of this area so everything else just makes sense. Let's start the fight now. First, we need to crush this ghost. Then immediately start looking for the deep sight orb that will be somewhere here in the Oryx room. Activating this deep sight will reveal an illusion, or a giant green glowing triangle, with each point being on a random part of Oryx. This illusion will stay active as long as deep sight is active, but if you ever run out of deep sight, these orbs appear pretty much everywhere here in the Oryx room right when you run out of deep sight, so you can just easily go find another one. So this illusion that's showing the triangle with each point being on a part of Oryx, those points of Oryx are what we need to activate. So how do we do that? Well, you'll see this knight named Vorlog kind of roaming the area that will pretty much always be making his way toward your team as long as you're sticking together. The goal here is to kill Vorlog, but we have to have the Ritual Conductor buff active, and you can get this buff by standing in one of the areas that you have to activate. And you'll notice the area surrounding you will light up green, giving you the Ritual Conductor buff. And once you can see Vorlog, you can take him out. Just make sure you're standing in the area. If you ever lose Ritual Conductor by stepping outside of the area, killing Vorlog won't count, so you'll have to wait for him to respawn to try again. Only one of you needs to kill him while Ritual Conductor is active, but just out of habit, we like to gather up as a team. Hope that makes sense. So if you're successful, the kill feed will actually let you know that Vorlog has died. You should see a floating green ring and a Taken King symbol. You'll need to line these up kind of as I'm showing here. It's really difficult to write out, so I will just show you. This is how you activate it. Ur-Nokru will launch like 8 Lucent moss your way, so you need to take them out immediately, otherwise it's an instant death. This will activate that limb of Oryx, and you'll see one of those hive glyphs appear over it. Cool. Now that that section of Oryx is completed, it's time to complete the other 2. Repeat the exact same steps as before. Use a deep sight if you ever forget which limb you're supposed to activate. It's pretty straightforward once you do it a couple times. And once you complete all 3 sections, you should see 3 glyphs floating in the air. Now it's time for part 2. You'll have to head to the outer rooms to kill 3 Hive Guardians, 1 in each room. My team, we like to split it up to make things easier, so 1 person per room. But if you find that you're struggling with it, maybe you're dying a lot, feel free to go in with 2 to 3 people per room and just take them out as a team. It doesn't matter how you do it. Either way, extremely important, make sure to take note of which symbol is in each room. You probably guessed it, but we're going to be killing the Hive Guardian here, crushing its ghost, and imbuing the correct glyph out in the Oryx room. So again, remember the symbol in this room as it will disappear once you kill the Guardian. Crushing the ghost will give you the vestige buff. Again, it's a little over 1 minute long, which should be enough time for you. Once you make it back to the Oryx room, you'll need to quickly find the deep sight orb and activate it. This will allow you to imbue the section of Oryx where the glyph is. If you don't have deep sight active, you just can't imbue it. It doesn't let you. And remember, if you run out of time while holding the vestige buff, or if you imbue the incorrect section of Oryx, you will die, so there is a little pressure put on you here while you have that vestige buff. So once all 3 sections of Oryx are imbued, a green mist will appear at each of the imbued areas. This will let you know that you are ready for damage, and you should start damaging right away. It's a good idea to pre-plan where you're going to do damage from, so as the 3rd person is coming out and imbuing that limb, Just make sure you all group up together where you're going to do damage. This damage phase can be incredibly annoying. She moves around, she teleports a ton, very similar to Nezarec's movement, except she's floating, which is even worse. My team is still using Gjallarhorn and rockets for damage. I'm not sure if that's the best, but we have been able to do about 70% of her HP in one phase as long as she plays nice. That was our best DPS so far in a single phase. So, editing Kothis coming in here, I did see a video created by Clyde. If you've seen that content creator, go sub to him, he's pretty awesome. But he actually found a really easy way to strip the shield and kind of stun Ur-Nokru. Apparently, she doesn't move if you remove the shield with Arbalest, so go ahead and give that a shot. I'm going to try this next time. Don't get discouraged if you can't do a lot of damage in your first phase. It's all part of the process. Once the damage phase is over, it's time to do it all over again as many times as you need. And once you've killed Ur-Nokru, you have cleared the Ghost of the Deep dungeon. Nice work. This is definitely one of the toughest dungeons in the whole game, with Spire of the Watcher being a pretty distant second place, at least in my opinion. This one is hard in terms of dungeon standards in Destiny. Hopefully we're able to get the Navigator. It's got a pretty low drop chance, but it's the new Strand Exotic Trace Rifle. I ended up getting it on my first try. I have a quick recap of it here of my first impressions, but it's a really cool gun. So you definitely want to grind this dungeon once per character per week to get your maximum amount of chances. Well, I don't want to keep you too long. I know this was a long one, but just remember to join the Discord if you want to find teams to run this. Link in the description. And I will see you all in the next video.